From the center of the galaxy, this is ForceCenter, a show about Star Wars, pop culture, and the ultimate adventure, life itself. I'm Ken Napzok.
I'm Joseph Scrimshaw.
And I'm Jennifer Landa.
And that's the first one I did from memory. I've got the new muscle memory down of intro changes. I've said something for 9 years. We are here in the 10th broadcast season of ForceCenter. We're going to be discussing something really fun today, the pulpy side of Ahsoka. And it's going to be a journey on just my own mind, pulp and my relationship with it over the years. It's ebbed and flowed, and it's going to be a lot of fun today. Before we get to all that, as always, today's podcast is brought to you by Audible. Get a free audiobook download and a 30-day free trial at audibletrial.com/ForceCenter. Over 180,000 titles, and we have to assume more now to choose from for your iPhone, Android, Kindle, or MP3 player. A little bit later, as always, our ForceCenter recommends an audiobook we think you should try out on us. Support the show in the process. But Joseph, Jennifer, we are also going to be talking about life because lots happened. It's the holiday season, or at least the post-holiday season. Yeah, Joseph? And Joseph, you survived some near disaster.
I did. I survived. Definitely post-holiday. I love seeing all the memes of people getting back to work and all of those circle back emails circling back on you immediately on the 2nd, the 3rd, the 4th. So we're definitely in that time period. I had a great life non-adventure, almost adventure, which also feels like a very Star Wars adventure. I love how the Force can be described lots of different ways, sometimes like waves, like, the tide comes and it goes, recedes. Water is both a giver of life and a taker of life, all these beautiful metaphorical things. And you can think about life of like sometimes you make a plan and a giant wave just hits your plans and it washes them all away. But then for the end of 2023, that literally happened to my wife and I. People perhaps saw a video of a place in California called Ventura where a massive wave caused by a storm out at sea just came in and smashed into this hotel and just rushed down the street and flooded all these restaurants. That's the hotel I was supposed to spend New Year's at. So it's amazing to have, outside of being on a reality show, like when do you have a video that just literally shows your plans being ruined that you can show your friends of like, hey, there's the moment my plans being ruined. And for all of us, 2023, I think it had been a challenging year. We were looking forward to like the peace of the ocean and nature. And instead we got the raw power of nature. And it was a fun challenge to not just be despondent and go, that's a sign from the universe that we shouldn't try to reset or have joy. A wave will crash into any plan you make. So we both really accepted the challenge of there's things you can control. There's things you can't control. We pivoted. We went to a jazz club that we'd never been to in LA for midnight. And that was kind of a fun train wreck, too, because the show was supposed to start at 11 and end at about midnight with a big Happy New Year's cheer. Show started at 11:47. The band played one song and they're like, is it New Year's already? Do we need to count down? But it was kind of cool because I'd never really experienced that. Like, everybody had just sat down. I was just given my arugula and chicken flatbread and my martini. The band had played one song, and it was like, hey, Happy New Year. Okay, on with what we were doing. And it was kind of fun that it was all like a part of one thing. Instead of like, I'm used to doing a show, you build up to New Year's, everybody cheers and dances and kisses, and then it collapses. And it was kind of fun to be right in the middle of something with a big group of people. So that was my New Year's and Star Wars adventures.
I think you did a wonderful job just by the look of your socials and Sarah's socials. You guys really leaned into the change that was put upon you. And I think big kudos to y'all. I think I might have pouted.
Silly hats and martinis. Oh, we pouted. There was some pouting. But Ken, you seem like you're recovering from a party, but your party was internal for the New Year's?
Yeah, I tapped out. I mean, we had a recording session between Christmas and New Year's, which actually was happy we did because it was a little bit of an anchor, to real life, to regular life, the work life, and the fun we have here. But yeah, no, I shut down. We don't go out. Grace and I, at no point did we discuss this. We just have stopped going out on New Year's. It's just for various reasons. Sometimes I miss it, but sometimes I don't. So yeah, I've been in a school mode. You get that school break and you're like, I'm not doing nothing. And that's kind of been it. I have played over 30 games, I think, of Madden football. which they go fast enough, so it's not like I've been glued to my chair. But like I've just given up. I'm like 7 days of like, nah, we ain't doing anything. So today is the day. It's why I'm a little blurry-eyed. It's like, yeah, I got to get back to life. But it was nice to disconnect. And we watched, we had watched Last Jedi around Thanksgiving, and so Grace wanted to watch Rise of Skywalker, and you know what? Especially today, talking about Pulp, it's a perfect movie for that conversation. I still hit those points where I get emotional. I still cry at it's not a Navy search. It's just people. Like I still, there's more of us, Poe. I still get misty-eyed. And I love that movie for those reasons, and it was a good reminder over the holiday season. So, but I'm back, baby. I'm back. Here we are, talking Star Wars.
It is. You're reminding me of the energy of Kenobi, him slowly coming back to life in front of us.
Yes. Yes. So it's been good. But Jen, I know different holidays for you. You weren't alone playing Madden football games.
I wish. No, I feel like my brain is just a giant cheese ball of just mishmash from the holidays. It's been a lot. Or like that wave in Ventura just crashed over me. That's the holidays. And I was trying to think of like what I did. And it was a lot of entertaining, negotiating, creating the magic of Christmas, right?
You did that. Thank you.
Yeah.
The magic of
I was wondering who made that.
Yeah.
Realize I can't talk about that too much with somebody in earshot. But last night we went to the Citizen Public Market in Culver City. I don't know if you guys have ever been there. It's a really cool spot. It's like it's like a fancier food court. Indoor food court in Culver City. And we stumbled upon this like trivia. I don't know. I've never really done very many trivia contest things. But it was really fun. And I was like, ooh, what are the questions going to be? One of the first questions was you had to look at the pictures of these characters and name them. And number one was Yoda. And I was laughing so hard. I'm like, this is my kind of trivia. And I got almost all of them right. I missed Christopher Lloyd's character from Who Framed Roger Rabbit. Who is it? Who is that character?
Judge Doom?
Thank you. Judge Doom.
Good point. Yeah.
I knew one of you would know it. So I missed that one. And I was embarrassed. I literally was walking around pacing, trying to figure out the character's name from Jurassic Park. Richard Attenborough, right? Richard Attenborough. Spare no expense. I was like, Dr. Grant, no. Ellie Sattler, no. Dr. Malcolm, right? No. What was his name? I know the answer. John Hammond. John Hammond.
Right.
I was like, I would never have known that, but I felt so bad. And then the last one was the character from Up, the older man.
Oh, gosh.
I called him Gramps.
His name's Old Guy.
His name is Carl. I knew his wife's name, Ellie.
That's right.
But his name is Carl. So
that's right.
We did pretty well, but then we had to bow because we had kids and they were getting...
Was this like seeing out the new year by sharing only do you know old to ancient characters? 800 years and younger?
Well, there was also on the list was Dr. House, which I knew. But yeah, no, it was like a real variety, like literature questions, all sorts of crazy. Yeah. So there were several rounds. We played 3 rounds and then we had to bow out. But I was
good bar trivia.
Yeah, it was bar trivia. That's it. It was a lot of fun. I recommend it. The woman who ran it, she was really, really kind. So
that's great.
That was the excitement.
I do enjoy some good bar trivia. It's been a bit, but I enjoy that.
A great dinner party of fictional characters there.
Right?
That you're listing.
I'll check it out. I was just thinking while you're talking, Jed, this is how weird LA or Southern California is. I've been here since 1998. I've been to Culver City, I'm not kidding, 5 times.
What? You're far from it. Yeah.
I passed through it once. I was at a studio once. I think I had a burger once there. I definitely had tacos in Culver City once.
It's really built up now. It's a bit much, but I really like it. It's very walkable, which is unusual in Los Angeles.
Yeah, that's true. And good bar trivia. Well, there you go. Simple, direct, and wave crashing life and Star Wars adventures all mixed into one.
That is right.
a wave crashing into a city is high adventure, danger, and it's its own kind of pulp, Joseph. So that's my radio DJ man transition into the topic today of the pulpy side of Ahsoka.
Oh, that is a perfect transition, a transition crashing us into this excitement. We are very excited to talk about the pulpy side of Ahsoka. We use the word pulpy a lot on ForceCenter to the point where some fans have put together a good-natured bingo sheet of ForceCenter phrases, and pulpy was on it. And so as we dive into this discussion, I wanted to sort of reset by talking about what do we mean by pulpy, and there might be people who are like, yeah, what the hell do you mean by that? And there might be people listening or watching who are like, I wrote my thesis on pulp, I don't need this. But I wanted to review for our own conversation. So I think Star Wars has many inspirations, as we all know, but one of the big ones to me has always had this element of pulp storytelling. And by pulp, I mean big, wild, sometimes weird elements. Really, not necessarily in Star Wars, but in original pulp, designed to shock and titillate audiences by showing them something far outside the norm of real life, and things that usually play on deep, old fantasies or fears of the human mind. You look at those old pulp covers, and they go to the extreme to like, wouldn't you want to be in this situation, being a hero in an exotic place, to, this is the scariest thing that could ever happen to you. And often I think the fears and the fantasies that they're tapping into are ones that maybe aren't okay to express in polite society. And this pulp term comes from pulp magazines, which were these cheaply made newsstand periodicals that were, written prose novellas with shocking covers and shocking illustrations inside. And the goal was to grab readers' attention with romance, crime, horror, larger-than-life grand adventure. And then eventually the actual format of pulp magazines gave way to that same spirit in 50s paperbacks and a lot of early comic books, as well as a lot of the matinee serial adventures that are full of, action and shocking cliffhangers like Flash Gordon that directly inspired Star Wars. And I think what's kind of important to looking at how it evolves into modern storytelling in general and in Star Wars is that pulp was the home of unabashed genre. There were, literary versions of science fiction like H.G. Wells and Jules Verne and Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, but pulps were the home of the lurid and the fantastic, and maybe what some people consider lowbrow or less than, the tentacled sea creatures worshiping half-naked cultists, in bold colors and dark shadows. And I think that the sci-fi, the superhero, the time travel, the multiverse stories that arguably dominate modern pop culture all have their roots in pulp, in this subversive exploits that are meant to be shocking and attention-grabbing. And Star Wars has always had these elements to different degrees, but to me it's interesting to see in our modern storytelling landscape which Star Wars stories dial the pulp elements down and which crank them up. And I think this is what got me really excited to discuss this in Ahsoka, because I think Ahsoka turns the pulp elements to 11 on purpose. We're going to discuss some of those specific pulp elements in Ahsoka, but I wanted to start with the big picture. Ken, I know you've gone on a back and forth journey with pulp elements over the years. So do you like the pulpier side of Star Wars at this point? And if so, why? Do you have a preference on the pulp scale from the less pulp to Andor to the as much pulp as we can fit in Ahsoka?
Yeah, get less pulp indeed on Andor, huh? I love it at now, currently. And I think it's a great idea to kind of reset the term pulp, because pulp and pulpy is definitely one of those description buckets we can toss Star Wars in, and serial adventures sometimes over here, but really they're all from the same thing. I'm looking across my studio at some Raiders of the Lost Ark toys, and I'm like, that might be the pulpiest of the pulp, and I love that. And I would argue that some people think Raiders is the most realistic of the indie movies, right? It's like, sure, because the way it was shot, I don't know. So I love where we're at with it. I think my relationship with pulp has gone up and down over the years, not based on the actual definition of pulp, just based on the reactions to different pulpy things and what I think I'm supposed to like and what I do like. I'm a Nolan Batman guy, and I was one of those podcasters in 2011 saying this is the dark and gritty thing we need versus that silly Marvel thing. And I don't know if I agree with that anymore, but I still am drawn to that. I don't want Adam West pow zambooey zooing around. Yeah, that's just something I didn't like as a kid. So that was the pop culture dividing line, where, you know, you either like this or you like that, which is silly. And Star Wars has all these things meshed into one beautiful adventure. And the pulpy side has just grabbed me more and more over the years.
That's great. That's great. Jennifer, how about you? How do you feel about the pulp side of Star Wars?
I like it. To me, that's where I feel more comfortable with. Although I do love the Andor's realism, just because it gives us variety. I think that's important. If it was all really pulpy, then we would tire of it, right? So having variety is what keeps it fresh. What brings in different types of audiences. And sometimes I can say, well, it's not so much for me. Although I love Andor, and I almost felt like Ahsoka could have been pulpier. I don't know. I'm excited to learn more because it's not really a genre that I'm as familiar with. Obviously, I know Flash Gordon, and those influences are very prevalent in the original trilogy. But like the actual literature side of it, I'm not as familiar with. So we'll have to learn more.
Yeah,
I will have to learn more. I look forward to this discussion.
You know, since we're doing video now, it'd be fun sometime to do like sort of almost like flashcards of various images. And like, do we have a knee-jerk reaction that's pulp? Because that's how it doesn't exist in our culture, in our parlance right now. Is just like as a discussion of the literal pulp. So did you like The Shadow or did you like this pulp? It's more how it lives on in terms of modern interpretations of it. Because this is fascinating already to see kind of how we're trying to separate out what is and isn't pulp. And to me, I don't think pulp necessarily means silly. I think that's a part of it. I think you can have a very pulp image, a very pulp out there, outlandish, shocking, weird storyline and have deep emotional truth in it. And we're going to, discuss that more. And I think that's where the pulp really works for me, when it's got its hooks in something deep and then it's just bonkers on the surface. So it isn't just sort of like thrown in on the top as aesthetic fun, but is baked into what's going on. And I think that's for me why I love, we're saying the pulpier side of Star Wars, but I kind of feel like it's, when it's good, it's something, it's not a side, it's the main ingredient, it's what seeps in. And I think one of the reasons I'm really drawn to pulp in general, but pulp in Star Wars is, we always talk about Star Wars being a balance of many things, the new and the old, and, a really fun, violent story that preaches pacifism. It's got all these contrasts and balances. And pulp is fascinating to me because in its history, it's unabashedly commercial. It's trying to be as weird. And I think the sort of the sexy and exploitative side isn't in Star Wars as much, but it was trying to be weird, scary, exciting, sexy to grab eyeballs and make you buy those magazines and paperbacks and comic books. But in its attempt to just grab your eye any way possible and make you buy it, it is hooking into deep, deep ideas. And I think that's the fully realized pulp that's in Ahsoka. That's like, the Night Sisters, the Great Mothers make you turn your head and go, weird witches. They look scary. They sound cool. But they're hooking into something deeper of witches, and the idea of them are very, very old. Why are we drawn to them? Why do they make us lean forward? What do they mean? Why do we fantasize about being stranded on a faraway world, attacked by giant monsters and bandits with only our laser sword to save us? Like, why are we attracted to those ideas? I think that's the part of pulp that I really like, when it is super weird on the surface and deeply meaningful and intriguing underneath. And to me, I like it when Star Wars is more pulpy because I think it's what sets Star Wars apart. I love Andor, and I have no criticism of the dark and the gritty. I have no criticism of focusing on the political. But to me, the world building of Star Wars is that it exists in this sort of bonkers world where every time you turn around, there's another weird creature trying to eat you, or another thing you can't explain or can't understand. And that's why I think we all love Dewey and Freedy and Andor. And just like that peppering of pulp is important to me because it makes it's what makes Star Wars feel different to me than Star Trek or Game of Thrones or that. And I think Andor just kind of on the surface level is a little less pulpy, not which isn't a criticism of it being darker, gritty, or more emotionally realistic.
Yeah, there's something you said in there I want to go back to that's even something that I feel over history, over time, that I've maybe accidentally been a part of. And this is why it's important to dive into the actual definition of pulp, even though that could seem, scholarly and classroom-like. But I think it's important because I even associate pulp with silly, right? That's the first thing you go to. Oh, pulp. Oh, you mean like, I don't know, talking donkeys with a sword or something? Like, and it's like those old commercials we grew up with instant coffee of you're drinking Folgers. No, I'm not. Yes, you are. Or it's like my friends are like, I don't like vegan food. I'm like, guess what you're eating right now? That's we all can just, these walls go up, and that's why I mentioned the Dark Knight as a dividing line.
Yeah,
where that was the discussion point. Marvel, because this, if you don't like, and obviously Marvel successful years, and that can get lost and watered down in the conversation. So you might be saying, not us, but others might be saying, oh, I don't like pulp, and that's literally what you're watching and enjoying. And yeah, I think you're right. You're both right with the dividing line. I just had to rewatch some Andor stuff. This I was looking for one quote. I ended up watching 2 full episodes of Andor because the dialogue, the acting, and the approach pulls me in. But that's going back to like the Raiders discussion. Raiders has some realistic dialogue, realistic acting. It's not over the top, and not that the other movies are. And I think you would think that isn't pulpy, talking about Raiders. And it is. It's all part of that thing. So I think it's important to redefine it and actually understand what you're either fighting against or enjoying.
Yeah, I think emotional realism can be there in a story that is told with bizarre, wild elements, and emotional realism can be there in a story that is told with less bizarre elements. Yeah. And I think that to me is the dividing line of just quality storytelling. Is it emotionally realistic? Am I hooked in? Real quick on Batman Begins, the first Nolan movie, because I think that's a great way to discuss it. I think that's a great movie, but it's a different take. I think Nolan is very, very scientific, and he goes out of his way to explain everything that Batman has in his costume, that those ears are like radio receivers, and all the little fins on his gloves that were always there just for aesthetics. That's where he keeps his batarangs now. There's an attempt to sort of make it logical and realistic, where the myth of Batman is a person became so wounded by their childhood trauma, they invented an impossible, dark, nightmarish version of themselves to provide justice by being the thing that they themselves are terrified of. Like when you lean into Batman in the pulp side, there's a real argument to be like, it makes no sense. The man dresses up as a bat. It's pulpy. Yeah. It's speaking to something deep and emotional. He's a picture of what vengeance feels like. Yeah. But then on the other side of it, you can have someone like Nolan come along and go, I'm uncomfortable with the pulpy. Let's make it a little bit more realistic. So I think that's a valuable one to talk about. And it's not even a criticism of Batman Begins. It's just sort of like on the spectrum of pulp. How much do you get concerned with? Do you need to make something realistic? Or like in Ahsoka, is it almost like we are unashamed? There isn't we kind of want to do a pulpy thing, but we want to hide it so people don't get ashamed. It's like in your face. And I think that's a big difference too.
I think it comes down to, again, part of the watering down of these discussion points over the years with social media and podcasts and everything, and punditry, is like, do you want to enjoy Batman punching people without sound effects of boom, zow, wowie? Because that's silly. This is what you gotta like. You gotta like this, and that became part of the discussion.
Yeah.
I almost wonder if people are mistaking camp with pulp.
Yes.
Because I kind of think of, and I love the old school Batman with Adam West, because I like camp, I like kitsch, right? And I'm not sure if it's because I'm looking back on it all these years later that I see it as kind of campy. But I think sometimes people will say that Star Wars can be campy, but it's not. It's pulpy, and there's a very clear distinction. It's almost, for me, the way I look at pulp is like it's heightened. It's not that it's any less truthful. You look at the original trilogy and the performances that Harrison Ford, Carrie Fisher, and Mark Hamill give Sir Alec Guinness. It's heightened, but it's not. I mean, this is why Harrison Ford became a movie star, because he showed that he can still keep it grounded, still keep it truthful with these extraordinary circumstances happening around him. So that's what I love pulp, I guess, and I love camp, and I love kitsch. I love anything heightened and dramatic.
But that's a really great distinction, because the Adam West Batman isn't literally winking at the camera, but it is comedy, and it is meant to be like. I saw it as a kid and took it deadly serious, and then I saw it again when I was like, in my teens, when the Keaton Batman movie came out, and realized that Batman was talking very seriously about not getting parking violations. Like, I didn't know this was comedy, and with especially like the original Star Wars, the effort is entirely the opposite from camp. It's let's take something that is silly, of this guy is flying in space and basically a broken down Buick with his dog. Now let's try to make you utterly believe it and care about it. And that's, I think, a good pulp camp divider. Star Wars can have campy points, but I think it's more pulpy.
Yeah, and I just think things like humor or light moments or silly creatures, or as we'll discuss, a community of turtle folk, it gets confused as camp, even if there's elements of camp. But I think, again, going to my point, I guess I'm just repeating my point of we've all been in these discussion wars for years, where it's like, what are you fighting against? Do you think by even liking camp you've lost something as a cinephile? Lost some ranking, lost some stature? Can you not just enjoy humor? And Last Jedi is I mentioned before on ForceCenter perhaps several times. The weeks leading up to it, there was a quiet little quote of Rian Johnson going, "The movie's funny." Hold on, I know I did Breaking Bad. It's funny, and people weren't ready for that because they wanted what they felt was serious Star Wars. You've all been there. Another thing I think that is about the dark. Do you feel more mature when you like dark and gritty? Do you feel comfortable to like something that's silly or weird? But even like the change from the original song in Jabba's palace, which I think is sort of pulpy, is these. It's silly, but there's these weird aliens singing kind of a dark, weird little song that you kind of don't know what the lyrics are, and the woman Ula is being exploited and dying in the middle of this kind of dark song, and then it goes to camp to like even Lucas's quote of like, "I thought it'd be funny to put a music video in the middle of Star Wars," and now Joe Yauza is breaking the fourth wall. That is the difference between pulp and camp, to me. In Star Wars. Yeah, great example.
Speaking of examples, before we get into Ahsoka, I just want to touch base with each of you of when you think of outside of Ahsoka, previous to Ahsoka, pulp in Star Wars. What kinds of, is there a specific moment or scene or character or idea that pops to your mind? Jennifer, what do you think of the previous to Ahsoka?
The Last Jedi, 100% for me feels much pulpier. Maybe I have the definition wrong, but pulpier, like you're saying, slightly campier, humorous, because I feel like there's a lot of emotional drama. There's a lot of sexual tension. It feels very sensational. The shirtlessness of Kylo Ren, right? And like the Han Leia romance, it feels more like 40s, 50s noir kind of romance. While, and I don't want to say romance, but the Rey Kylo relationship, it feels more like a smutty 60s movie. You know what I mean? Like it's got this like weird tension going on. There's just so many bizarre things happening.
You could totally make an old 50s paperback cover out of like, the shirtless man she wasn't supposed to reach for in her mind, but couldn't stop herself. Yeah.
It's very broad shoulders. I mean, yes, absolutely. That's the novel cover that comes to mind. So yeah, Last Jedi. And that's why I love it so much, is because it dialed it up. And that's what I'm saying. Ahsoka could have dialed it up even more. And then the fans would have really been mad, like we saw with The Last Jedi.
How about you, Ken? What are some examples of pulp?
God, there's so many options to pull from. But today I'm feeling Solo. I just look at that, and that includes some of the, Emilia Clarke's Kira being a little noir femme fatale, but also having the dime store cover vibe to me, and that you can put that smooch, as Irving Kershner would say, in Lando's closet on the cover of a dime store novel, I guess, if you want. But that just the adventure, but also like Lady Proxima was something that I always rubbed up against, and Linda Hunt's voice acting is wonderful. But I remember even coming out of the movie going, you could have just had subtitles with that one, right? You could have done the Jabba thing. We didn't need Jabba the Hutt and Return of the Jedi going, "What are you doing, Luke?" But I think I've changed my opinion on that. Where I go back to that scene, I think there's great humor, there's great tension, there's great adventure, and it's out of this world, literally. And now Lady Proxima, just everything about her I enjoy, and that might be time changing my opinion. But start to finish, Solo's my pulp go to right now.
I love that because I think a part of the pulp discussion is that it's a genre stew. There were pulps of all kinds.
Yeah.
There were horror, crime, romance, pirate, all these different genres of excitement and danger and sexuality. And I think Solo is such a tour to it, even by the time they're trying to escape in the Kessel Run, and the Soma Verminoth monster is a Lovecraftian cosmic horror. Unknowable beast. How does it even exist in this space? And it touches on westerns, it touches on crime, it touches on all sorts of genres. In the way that the Solo Kira romance is played is very, very noir, and very old school.
I don't want to rehash all old analysis of films and Star Wars TV shows, but the Kessel Run's a great example to me of the expectations. Like, all right, we're probably going to get the Kessel Run in that movie. That was a foregone conclusion going into the film. And then there's a giant space monster in the middle of it? No. I think there was pushback against it because, that wasn't cool. That wasn't badass Han outrunning people or something. And I think that's why I love that scene so much. It is into the darkness, the monster out in the ocean. It's all that stuff and stew indeed. And again, go into those moments of camp and pulp and shame. A lot of shame in some of these comments about these films, I think.
Yeah, and very close to the surface metaphor of this cocky young man thinking he can do the impossible, and there is a lurking unknown that is literally dragging him toward failure and death. Yeah. I think that's pretty clear-cut analogy. A couple of scenes that jumped to my mind, we discussed it a lot. I love it, but I think it is a tonal shift in Rise of Skywalker that challenges people. But Palpatine's lair on Exegol, that whole first scene is extremely the dark side of pulp, of like a hidden temple, dark magic, the actual very, very 1950s mad science, bubbling tubes, the lurid technicolor, actual colors of the Snoke tubes, but all of it is kind of getting towards this fear that no matter what you do, especially from Kylo Ren's perspective, I'm marching around the galaxy trying to be the darkest, scariest thing there is. And there's always something darker, scarier, unnatural, more powerful underneath you, lurking there. It's all very pulp on the surface, to the point where I think it turns some viewers off because it looks like those old 1950s movies. And what? Palpatine's getting a mad scientist Frankenstein lab? And some people don't like that. That's fine. Totally. To me, it's got all the fun in the boldness of that surface aesthetic, with all of that depth of fear, that the sort of the idea of the old wizard, and the idea of like a grandfather figure that is always going to be more powerful than you, that you can never escape. Those are deep fears that, you are born to be killed by the father. You will never surpass the father. Like in that Kylo Ren, and it's all there with, over the top, bubbling mad scientist crap on top.
Having just rewatched that, number one, the sequence does need the eye of Webbish Bog. I'm all about that too. But I mean, you're so right. It's a dividing line at the very beginning of the movie, and I understand if people rub up against it, because things, I rub up against a lot of things in Star Wars. But like, I just love this, and I've died before. It's become one of my favorite Star Wars lines. It's just become, because it is exactly what you're describing. And I've died before. Just the lightning strikes. So good.
I've died before. It almost feels like he loses control of his facial muscles during the word before, which I love. I'll throw out there also quickly, because I think especially for people our age, I'm sure maybe other people have experienced the original trilogy this way. I think we just kind of took a lot of things without questioning them or their heritage because we were kids. But looking at like Jabba's Palace and what a genre stew that is, that it's a gangster movie. It's suddenly becomes a pirate movie where our hero, this medieval knight samurai combo, who needs his sword to save the day has to walk the plank. And then there's just the like bizarre, weird boldness of there's a mouth in the middle of the desert that you get thrown into. And, again, I don't think Star Wars pushes on this as much, and I think it's a question of whether they should. But also in Jabba's scene, there is that element of exploitation of putting women in bikinis, and that is pulp heritage. Put a pin in that discussion because it's a great discussion to have how you feel about that, whether it should be there. But in terms of just pulp heritage, it's extremely the exploitative sexual side of pulp.
Mm-hmm. We just didn't have this discussion in the back of Starlog magazine in 83 and 84. It just was, we just took it as Star Wars.
It just was. All right, let's dive into Ahsoka, the show itself. Whales and witches and zombie stormtroopers. Oh my, says Judy Garland. How do you think, Ken, the pulp elements helped tell the story of Ahsoka? We can talk about aesthetics or vibe or history, but what did they actually do to be the story, to tell the story, to help us know the characters, the galaxy?
I think for me, this is the first Star Wars story that was very much outside the boundaries of the galaxy we know, that far, far away galaxy. We went in even farther, and that was just kind of, again, talking. I know maybe just vibes and aesthetics too, but just the storytelling of you're in uncharted territory. We don't know it. For a lot of people, this was the first time they were introduced to what we called space whales for years, but are now known as star whales, the purrgil. It was just a way of showing you are off the path. And no one really knows who you are. What are you going to do in these situations? And you're learning things about yourself. So you're learning new things. You're discovering old ancient things that might be used again. And it was supposed to be an out of that galaxy story, and it felt different in that regard versus, especially we were in a post Andor world. Bad Batch has some wonderful, wonderful pulpy, high sci-fi kind of elements, but it's still got the gritty government and political conversations and all that kind of stuff. This was, to me, it was supposed to push some boundaries, literally and figuratively. And I thought that was a good use of it.
Yeah, I totally agree. Jennifer, how do you feel the big pulp elements help tell the story of Ahsoka?
I like Ken's answer because I got nothing. I mean, honestly, the way that I viewed it was just like, what are they going to pull from Star Wars Rebels? What are they going to pull from the Clone Wars into live action? Because there's a whole other world, so to speak, that we've all experienced, but the average viewer may not have. So I was just curious to see how they were going to piece it all together and connect the threads. And I thought that they did a good job. But again, I would have liked more, which I'm going to get into with the Night Sisters.
Nice. No, I think that's a really, really good point to bring up the animated, because we were talking about kind of big examples from the films of pulp, but Clone Wars really was Lucas doing like, I don't know if this will ever make money. I'm doing what I want, and the Clone Wars swings big between the Geonosian brainworms, the Zilla Beast, Cad Bane just walking out of a John Wayne movie, but also being an alien. Hondo Ohnaka just straight up having a 50s flying, spinning saucer as his ship. No comment needed. And I think Rebels is a little less pulpy than Clone Wars, but it's still there with, the Bendu and all sorts of various weird pulpy elements. Everything going on with Maul and holocrons, all pulpy. So Jennifer, I think that's a great point, that a part of what's going on with Ahsoka is, I think, a desire to say this wilder side of Star Wars that's a little safer in animation. It's a big part of Star Wars, and we are putting it on live action, big screen, tentpole Star Wars. Yeah. So there's no doubt. And I think for me, the part of the power of it and how it helps tell the story is that there's this tension in Ahsoka between rigidity, logic, rules, organizations, expectations, and this truth that there is a wild, impossible, endless, not just galaxy, but universe out there. And I think all the pulp elements of the witches and the star whales and the zombie stormtroopers support the idea that pulp is truth, that Jedi are real. The Force is real. Witches are real. Other galaxies are real. Those ancient stories are all real. So if you sort of look at all that, is like these are real factors that determine the fate of the galaxy, with characters who are literally opposing that. Ziono is the guy who's saying there shouldn't be a Star Wars movie called Attack of the Clones. That's dumb. He's basically saying pulp isn't real. He gets that report and he's like, I didn't write down the exact quote, but like, you expect us to believe this? They're Jedi and, failed Jedi and whales and another witches, another galaxy. You expect me to believe this BS report? Mm-hmm. He's centered as this sort of non-believer, and Thrawn was centered as, if not a non-believer, somebody who hadn't experienced yet. His world was rigid, angles and political machinations, and now he's in this world where he's sitting back and going, all this pulp is real, and I'm going to embrace it in order to have power. And I think that there's even a power in the pulp with Ahsoka herself, because she is in a place of rigidity where there are only so many outcomes and she's focusing on the negative. Everything is very limited in her mind. And as she gets more and more exposed to the pulp, she opens up to, oh yeah, anything is possible. There's always another way. There's always another destiny. Let me reach out to these, space whales and literally get a ride in their mouth. I mean, it's a pretty direct embracing of the idea of pulp as endless, wild possibilities. Do not limit your imagination. Anything is possible is a pretty literal epiphany that I think Ahsoka has.
Yeah, I think that's part of the valuable lesson of the series. Of again, like I said earlier, of like, who are you once everything you know is taken away? Who are you? And the value in it. In listening to you talk, I'm thinking of Bo-Katan and the episode 2 or 3 of this past season, just saying it's all not real, and learning that there's value in those stories, and then there's things to learn once you discover these new areas. I think that was a valuable part of it, valuable and needed use of pulp.
Yeah, we did. I love that you brought that up. We talked about it a lot, that episode, that seeing that mythosaur and saying, it very much like in Ahsoka, the old stories could be true, even though they sound silly and fantastic. What is lurking in the depths that has greater meaning for us is very pulpy. All right, let's get into the Night Sisters. I'm so anxious to hear Jennifer's thoughts. Jennifer, what was the most interesting and meaningful to you about the Night Sisters' presence and role in Ahsoka?
This, to me, was my biggest challenge, because I love the Night Sisters and I really wanted to see more of them, their space, perhaps it's budget reasons, right? But they were kind of confined, because I would have loved to see something like we saw with Palpatine in Rise of Skywalker. Like, that would have been amazing, but a budget, we know, is more limited for the TV shows. To me, it felt like when you're going to Costco and you get a sample of something. And so Filoni's there giving us a sample of the Night Sisters for the people who have no idea who these crazy witches are, right? And they're like, oh, this is actually pretty good. And then Dave says, over here in the frozen aisle, you can get those biscuits in season 2. That's what I'm hoping. We're going to get those biscuits in season 2, because I just feel like it wasn't enough. It gave us a taste of the Night Sisters, but for me, I wanted more. It felt very Macbeth. I think we've talked about here, right? So that was cool, but I don't know. I felt like, and I don't want to say they were underutilized, because that's not true. They were used the right amount to draw people in.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've talked about this before. I feel like the first season of Ahsoka is very complete from the perspective of Ahsoka and Sabine's specific emotional journeys,
right? And
there's some plot resolution in terms of Ezra gets home, Ahsoka and Sabine accept perhaps a different destiny here on Pridia. But a lot of it then, plot-wise, in my opinion, is table setting, which leads to almost all of our discussions of Ahsoka. At some point, one of the three of us will go, I loved it, but I just felt teased. We only just kind of got to know Baylan and Shin, and then they were gone. We only kind of got to find out what happened to Ezra. We only kind of got to see what Thrawn's up to. So much of the show did, in a plot way, I think, it is on purpose. Welcome to Star Wars Costco. And Ezra's like,
Yes.
do you want to try a little turtle folk sandwich? And the witches are over here going, eat a little string of fate. But you're not getting the whole thing at all. It's we talked about that difference between tip of the iceberg storytelling, where something's kind of mentioned offhand, like the Clone Wars in the original Star Wars movie, and it intrigues you. Mm-hmm. But then there's this is the beginning of a thread, and we haven't followed it through yet. And I think that's what's going on with Thrawn, Night Sisters, Ezra. So I really respect that position on, you teased me with the Night Sisters. You let me eat a sample, and then it's like, great, I'll have 5 boxes. They're like, no, they're not available yet.
Exactly, not available yet. Yeah. I mean, and again, this is me with my own expectations, as we've talked about, the fan expectations versus what's being presented on screen. And I have to wrestle with that myself, because not everyone knows who these Night Sisters are. And they're probably like, wow, this is awesome. Cool. Right? As opposed to, I want more.
Or there's witches in Star Wars.
Yeah,
Ken, how do you feel about the Night Sisters' role in Ahsoka?
I really agree with you, Jen. Actually, once I kind of listened to you there, I love them in the series, and I can't wait to talk about hopes for them. And I think you're right. You kind of said it in there of like, no, they were used probably right for this season, and then Joseph, you tag that with your excellent analysis on, like, there's a lot coming. I think I have some worries. Because I'm having Game of Thrones flashbacks when I was like, oh my gosh, everybody, when the sand snakes show up, get ready. And then they showed up, and it was okay that they didn't use them properly. Don't worry about it. This is where I really would love to, I don't think she'll ever come back to Star Wars, but this is where we're like, could we have Katie Lucas writing some of the Night Sisters stuff? Could Katie Lucas come? Because my love of the Night Sisters went from I know their origins in EU. I was one of these. I don't want witches in Star Wars. This is going back to the Clone Wars days. It's like, come on. I'm gonna go watch Nolan's Batman again, because there's witches in Star Wars, and now there's some of my favorite things because of what they mean, because of Asajj Ventress's journey, because of Mother Taliesin and that feeling of I'm home again, but really you're not, and all the things that they mean. In that series, there's a depth that wasn't here yet, and I have a lot of faith in Dave. This is where I wish the ball could be passed to another writer sometimes, because I agree with Jen. It was a great tip of the iceberg. This is coming. They're there for Thrawn. Thrawn's got not just for Thrawn, but because there's the Morgan Elsbeth of it all. But it just felt like it was part of this bigger tapestry, and that for me telling people for years, no, the Night Sisters are really cool. And those folks in my life who was like, they're really cool, they kind of went, I don't know. But after seeing them in Ahsoka, so I just wanted more. It's only the drive for more.
Yeah, I totally understand wanting more, and this is maybe a part of Ahsoka where my previous emotional relationship with the Night Sister story in Clone Wars actually benefited what was in Ahsoka, and I really felt emotionally connected to it. There's the fun and the thrill of seeing them, and seeing the green magic and all that, and the different kinds of magic and all that. But I think because Ahsoka did a good job in my opinion of setting up from the beginning this sort of ache from all the characters to be reconnected to what was lost. That theme translated really well to what I think is incredibly powerful about the Night Sisters, both in the Clone Wars and now with these great mothers that we meet. That that they are from a society that is proud, unique, and has been decimated. We don't know exactly how they were decimated in Peridea. In the Clone Wars, we know that they were murdered by Sidious because Mother Taliesin was a threat. We get to see them used and abused in the Clone Wars. So I think I carried some of that emotional weight over to Ahsoka and could see in these great mothers. I think what can be deep and powerful about the different storytelling we have in different cultures about witches. And there's many ways to interpret it, but for me, I think one of the great tensions of witch mythology is that they're often symbols of society, individuals, beliefs, women who have been unfairly maligned, hunted, murdered, exiled. So they're sort of wounded and righteous, and I pity them and I root for them. And then at the same time, they also want to murder the heroes probably and me. So there's great tension of when you see a witch story, and I'm speaking from a male perspective, and I think women probably have much better insights than I do on it. But for me, a really powerful witch story is sort of like I relate to them from feeling wounded. The world's unfair, cruel to me. But then it's the sort of the fantasy of like, and then what if I had power to do something about it? Yeah. And I think their story tapped into that for me, because it was a story of survival and this question of what are they going to do when they survive? Because right now I'm kind of rooting for them, as long as they don't kill Ahsoka and Sabine. I'm rooting for them. I kind of find if they kill Thrawn, no offense to Thrawn fans, or at least fight him, I'm rooting for them, but they're also frightening. And there's a fun tension to sit in for me. So I think that was valuable.
Yeah, no, I would love to have one conversation with them without Thrawn around. They had it with Elspeth, I know, but like I want them to kill Thrawn. Right? But can they be the Rook?
He's standing around there, watching, going, interesting ancient rites. Thanks for letting me watch. I also just want to touch briefly on the thread of fate stuff. As many people have looked at, figured out, talked about. Our friend Alex Damon over at Star Wars Explained has some great videos about these great mothers being named after Greek figures who spun and cut fate, and that's a little new for Mother Talzin really kind of had her boiling pot and her potions, and these are all much more tied to this idea of this thread of fate, and a lot of their magic is these literal lines of fate. And I appreciated that, because I think that's, going back to Macbeth, as you were saying, Jennifer, one of the other powerful fundamental things about witch myths, the idea that it is possible to know destiny, and only these people know it. And if they know it and control it and see it, does that mean by definition that we don't have agency, that they can spin our fate? And I think that element of it was powerful. We could do a whole episode about all of the ways they're talking about fate and whether Sabine's actions and Ahsoka's actions are predictable or not. But I think introducing that idea of is fate set and locked, determined, or do characters have agency? There's a fear there with the witches that they're going to be able to say, nope, there's nothing you can do. We know fate.
Yeah, I already doubt their powers when they were like, we heard things. We heard things from...
It is fun to think that there's absolutely a limit to their power, and they're BSing Thrawn, like, loose thread.
But I mean that kind of like it on their side, like they're just kind of like, it's the fortune teller in Pee-wee's Big Adventure. Hand me your wallet.
Right. Or the people on YouTube, reading the charts, tarot cards, whatever. It's very, very general sometimes. I'm like, it's going to apply to anyone.
They're using that to eventually destroy Thrawn. Like, let's keep telling them things.
But they're real accurate about Ahsoka's location in the whalebone graveyard. Speaking of pulp, let's talk a little bit about Morgan Elsbeth, because I think she's the real human face that lets us into the Night Sisters story. Ken, how did you feel about Morgan Elsbeth's journey to become arguably a full member of the Night Sister community?
I really liked it. This is where I think I would have liked a little bit more depth. Not that's, I don't say that as a criticism of the show. Just it fit in nicely to what the show was trying to do, and I got a lot out of it. And even the ceremony, so to speak, of her taking the sword, and other than just being kind of really cool, wild, pulpy Star Wars stuff. I wish I was rooting. I wish I knew and was rooting more for Morgan Elsbeth more, because I think she's a great character. It just means I want to go back and learn a little bit more of her path. I mean, she was great in Mando, and just tying her to just the Imperial side of things and her manufacturing arms. That's all great stuff. And to now know that she was a displaced witch who's trying to get back home. I think there's some additional storytelling, maybe a book or a comic series, even though I'm trying to catch up with all that. So all that to say, I think it was effective. I liked it. I liked it to the big themes of what you're talking about, of disconnection. And she was in, I don't say Morgan Elsbeth was in service to anyone. quite frankly, but working with Thrawn or for Thrawn or trying to connect to Thrawn and serving that purpose, and then just to get home, it ended up working for me. It's powerful. I was sad actually when she died because I thought there was more to the story. There could have been more to the story. So that means to me it was effective.
Yeah, I think maybe she can reanimate. I don't know, but I agree with you. Sometimes I have a weird action figure litmus test where I've watched something and I think I know how I feel, and then I see the action figure and I have I must have that. I had I was more attached to Morgan Elsbeth when I realized when I saw her figure, and it's like I have to have that, which maybe speaks to my own dark obsessions. I don't know, but I think I would have. There's so much storytelling in Ahsoka that is less and more and a soft touch, but I think it's established so early on that she is of the Night Sister community in some way. We don't have the details. Alex Damon also has a video deep diving into a possible buried origin for her in some Star Wars short story somewhere. I'm not going to trouble myself with that too much right now because it's pretty far from on screen or confirmed. But whatever her relationship was to the Night Sisters, I think setting her up so early in the show is an analogy to what Ahsoka and Sabine are going through of a member of a lost culture, a member of a lost community striving to get back. And I think this portrait of somebody who she aligned herself with Thrawn in the Empire for whatever reasons. She says, I'm a survivor. Mm-hmm. But what's powerful to me is what she really wants is to fulfill reconnection and identity. I love to me, kind of the completion of her arc. It isn't just getting the gift of shadows from the Great Mothers, but when Thrawn asks her to sacrifice herself, and she's like, of course. And he says, for the Empire. And then she turns around and says, for Dathomir. That's an example to me of phenomenal less is more storytelling, because it retroactively tells me okay, everything she's been doing for the Empire, for Thrawn all this time is for her own ends, for her community that she cares about. And I think she is a great contrast to Ahsoka and Sabine's journey, where they're full of questions and doubt about what it means to be a Jedi. Are they on the right path? Am I doing the right thing? And Morgan Elsbeth is just like this freight train of I got weird dreams. I'm doing everything. I will give up everything. I rewatched the scene where she is, converted into, given the gift of shadows. She who heard our dreams across the stars. You ready for the gift of shadows? Do you pledge yourself to the sisterhood, the magic, the old ways? Do you abandon your old life for this new one? It really is a mirror of what's going on with Sabine and Ahsoka, where they're full of doubt and questions. And by the end, they kind of get to the same place as Morgan of they pledged themselves to a new life here on Peridea. So I think there's a lot of fun mirroring of Ahsoka and Sabine. Final thing real quick. Some of that text in that scene to me is a great example of pulp. Of you could write that so it's a little grittier, so it's a little more we can take this serious. Nope, it's full on. She who heard our dreams across the stars. It's unashamed, straight out of an old pulp, an old witchy pulp. You pledge yourself to the sisterhood, the magic, the old ways. I love that.
Yeah.
Jennifer, how do you feel about Morgan Elsbeth's journey?
I felt like the twist was not really necessary. I mean, I understand from a plot perspective, they kind of had to have that. They're going to introduce the Night Sisters. But to me, I don't know. I thought it was cool. It was interesting, but I didn't feel anything when it happened. And I would have because going back to the Clone Wars, we really see the Night Sister rituals, right? And I felt like it was a ritual that was done hastily, in a Vegas wedding. You know what I mean? I wanted it to be a little bit more pomp and circumstance.
Bada boom.
I'm sorry, you guys. I'm sorry. I don't mean to be this. I love the show, but I have such high expectations because we know this world, we know these characters, and I'm like, if you're gonna bring these characters onto the board, let's really let's show, like you're talking about, Ken. I've been building Night Sisters up for years, and I'm like, ta-da! You don't get what everything that they are. And so I don't know. I thought that, and then I was sad that Morgan Elsbeth got killed. Spoiler alert.
I was too.
Right? I'm like, well,
It made sense.
I guess I won't learn that much more. I mean, obviously it has to happen, and it may happen in books or comics or other things, but it's like, if you're going to introduce that, which is such a big revelation, I really wanted to see it play out and have her be a threat for season 2 as well.
Yeah. I think there's a lot going on to show her immense commitment. I think, there's such a connection to Sabine of like what Sabine goes through in that episode of the pledge to an order, the mastery of a blade, with her getting Talzin's blade that then cuts to Ezra building his new blade. And I think there's a lot to compare and contrast to the Jedi. And I think there is some, as much as we love the Night Sisters and we can root for them and understand them, there is still like they're pulling from the dark side. And Elsbeth's attitude is pretty, it's the Night Sisters, our community. Yay, sisters. We're going to kill everybody who's not us. And a little bit of like, this is where the way of the sword leads you kind of stuff going on with her. Maybe. I think that's an interesting discussion, but I still did feel like I pumped my fist for Ahsoka and then hung my head for Morgan.
Right.
All at the same time. So I think a thing that we're all excited to discuss, given our love of the Night Sisters, and feeling like maybe we would have liked even more in Ahsoka. Ken, what are your hopes for the reborn Night Sisters back on Dathomir? All them containers.
Yeah, it emerges a little bit of what you were just talking about there at the end of perhaps the lessons of where does vengeance lead you versus where does justice take you. I want them to be the big baddies in a lot of ways, despite there maybe being some reasons to root for them, because that would make them even more compelling. I think the Star Wars galaxy, whatever that galaxy is, I don't know the name. Alex, have you made a video on that yet? I want them to show up with their containers and everyone to be like, wait, there's witches in Star Wars. I want
certainly Senator Ziono.
Ziono will be like,
he's going to be being actively choked by one, going, "It's not real. It's not real."
Yeah, you're telling me they ride Rancors? What? I'm excited for that. We got some questions. We got a question coming up on a question show that's about future villains and all that stuff, and that's intriguing to me because you want something new, but it's Star Wars. It needs to dance around the light and the dark, and you said it there yourself, Joseph. They tap into some darkness, whether or not their intentions might be good or they come from a good spot. I don't know. So them returning to that galaxy, I don't think it's just to reestablish Dathomir and set up some gift shops for people wanting to tour Witchtown. I think they want to take back what maybe they felt they had or what they want, and that's very intriguing to me. A new form of villain, right? Some green magic floating around there, some green wisps, and it's been done so well in the Clone Wars. I think that's part of why Palpatine knew they had to go, and there's also in that timeline, not we're not talking multiverses here, but in that Clone Wars era and all that kind of stuff. I always took that the witches just were kind of over there. You don't bother them, they won't bother you. I don't even know if that's true. I don't know the whole story on it there. I'm just saying from a story, that's how I took it. And them coming back and being like, ain't no one going to tell us what to do. No one puts witches in the corner anymore. And this guy who we may or may not think's a clown, this blue guy, we'll figure that out later. But we need him, he needs us, we got a team. And we're going to come back. And for his empire, I don't know. It might be for ours. I think there's a great big danger of them, but also you're going to be behind them to a certain point of view, and it's going to challenge fans as well if they're the big bad. And I'm super excited about that, and it might not be the case.
I really agree. I think the thrill of thinking of Night Sisters Unleashed, thinking of them as, even if they're still aligned with Thrawn is trying to manipulate them and use them as basically his foot soldiers, and they have a little bit of that. Yeah, we'll take the galaxy for you, and then bye Thrawn might be their perspective, but that's really thrilling to think of from just an aesthetic standpoint of lots of green weirdness flowing on screen is really exciting. But the deepest thing to me that you're touching into is what are their true motivations? What do they want? What is their philosophy? Because the dark side is natural, that it exists, but it's the dark side needing to take over everything that causes imbalance. So what we see of the Night Sisters in the Clone Wars for me is Mother Talzin is kind of playing around with staying in touch with the rest of the galaxy. She's like, all right, Sith Lord, you want an apprentice? Here you go. Here's my son. And, oh, that really did not work out for me. In every interaction they have with the larger galaxy is just manipulation and horror. And we see them mostly like, we just want to be here. We got our Night Brothers over there. We're the matriarchal society. We're a sisterhood. We're here for Asajj. We're not really, come home. We will help you. And then it is like they really are not poking the bear too much. They try to assassinate Dooku, but Palpatine doesn't really care about that. They're not really poking the bear. It's just Palpatine's like, I don't like them being over there and being powerful, so I will come to where they live and kill them for existing. Yeah. Now, contrast that with what we've learned about these great mothers. That it sounds like in Pridia in the old days, they were the dominant, terrifying power of this Force strong planet. The Night Sisters that we know from the Clone Wars are maybe just sort of like they're branching out. They started a franchise in the galaxy we know, and these great mothers were maybe the original Night Sisters, maybe billions of years old, maybe exploded into existence with the stars. Who knows? They're like, actually, we don't just live peacefully; we conquer. Or is it just we want to rebuild our ranks and we're just going to sit here on Dathomir? If you leave us alone, we'll leave us alone. All that motivation stuff. Do they want to live in peace? Do they want to conquer? Does their culture demand revenge? Like, after we kill a billion souls, we can be at peace. Like, what is their culture, their perspective? I can't wait to find out. Jennifer, what are your hopes for more reborn Night Sisters?
Yeah, I think that's a really, really great point. And that's what I want to see in a season 2. A whole other show, I don't know, because I do feel like there's so much more to explore. I mean, going back to the courtship of Princess Leia when they were first introduced, and like the idea of these different groups and the different types of Night Sisters. And what I loved about the Clone Wars is that, yes, it's a matriarchal community, society, but there's like a real anger and riot girl element to the characters that Katie Lucas, I think, brought in her writing. And I felt like that was kind of missing here. I want to see warriors, not just the mothers. And that was what made Mother Talzin so interesting, is that she was terrifying and powerful, but she was also nurturing and manipulative, like all these things. And that's what made her such an interesting and complex character. And I just felt like that was lacking with these mothers. We didn't get to really see any of that. And how could they? Unless they did a whole episode on it, and that's not what the show is about. So
what if season 2 begins and they're unpacking their crates listening to some Bikini Kill at L7 and they're just they're just going for it. Like, we're back.
Yes. But you know what I mean, right? Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
It's just something about very it's female empowerment, and like that's what that's why so many people nowadays are like talking about covens and witches, and it's like it's reclaiming that power and finding the strength in that, and I just felt like that was not here.
Yeah, and it could be a righteous story of like Dathomir in this sector is our planet, our world. We have a deep connection to it, and we want that, and maybe it will be a story of just righteousness of we're not here to fight your war, we're here to reclaim what's ours. It could also absolutely be that story, and that would tap into something really powerful, I think, as well. We're going to take a break, but we got a recommendation first, right, Ken?
We do. We've got a audiobook we think you should try out on us. We're suggesting E.K. Johnston's Crimson Climb. We are excited to dive into this one ourselves, another Kira story. And you want to listen to it, you can do it on us by downloading your free audiobook today by going to audibletrial.com/ForceCenter. Once again, that's audibletrial.com/ForceCenter for your free audiobook. All right, quick break. We'll be back to dive into more of the pulpier side of Ahsoka here on ForceCenter. Welcome back to the show. Oh, man, we've got some riot girl punk music playing in the background. We're talking about witches and vengeance and the future of their journey, but also Joseph diving into even more of the pulp in Ahsoka.
That is right. Where do you go from witches? Well, how about their zombies that they make? We want to be sure to talk about the undead night troopers. Star Wars has had a couple of versions of zombie troopers. There's the EU Death Troopers book, which I have never read. I'm not super familiar with. One of my favorite arcs in the Clone Wars is the Geonosian brainworms, where the clones are animated by those Geonosian brainworms. It's definitely some zombie aesthetic going on. But here we get full-on zombie troops, what the people have been asking for decades, reanimated in live action with dark magics. Try advertising that at Costco. Would you like some of these? They've been reanimated in live action with dark magics. Jennifer, what to you is fun and interesting about the zombie troopers and their relationship to the Night Sisters?
Okay, so here's my critique. All right, so here's the thing. So I loved the Death Troopers book. It was terrifying when I read it, especially because it's like it's in such a small space that they tell this story, and I had nightmares for weeks. And so I'm like, well, maybe it's because it was in a book that it made it scary. But then I think of the Brainworms episodes, and that to me was also terrifying and creepy, even though it's quote unquote cartoon. So it's not that. So I was like, what was it missing? Because it felt a little bit like a video game to me. I know the characters are going to live. They're going to escape. It's going to be fine. What could it? But we know that with like Walking Dead, right? We see that all the time. We know our heroes are most likely going to live. What I think could have been beneficial would have been adding, and this is where it's complicated, right? Because this is also for kids, having some like flesh dripping, some sort of gore element. I actually could have to add up like the creep factor, the scare factor. I think it could have made it just, I don't know, a little bit more frightening. Because to me, I just was kind of sitting there passively, like, I know I'm supposed to feel something, and it's cool that zombie troopers are there, but and I'm a scaredy cat. Or, even look at Game of Thrones with the White Walkers. Every time those characters came on screen, I was terrified because we didn't know if one of our heroes was going to get, killed. And so there's a real threat. So I feel like if you're going to introduce these characters, these zombie troopers, make them either gory or have somebody die.
I think that you're tapping into something really interesting. That a lot of what I enjoyed about the Night Troopers was on a aesthetic, thematic level. But I think what isn't there that you're describing is seeing them, the horror of them through the eyes of the protagonist, through Ahsoka, Sabine, and Ezra's eyes. Ahsoka, Sabine, and Ezra are like, weird, never seen that before, and then it is treated as an obstacle, which really works in the show because that's Thrawn's intention of let's put something that they just have to chew through again and again and again. That's going to keep coming, and from a storytelling standpoint, it taps into some of what is powerful to me about zombies, that they have a single-minded focus, like they're just hunger, eat, repeat. And I think it's one of the reasons we're attracted to them, because I think we have this pull deep down of like, what if we didn't have all these complex feelings? What if we just wanted one thing, mindlessly went after it, got it, and then repeat forever? That there's a little bit of like, there's a horror in zombies, but I think part of what we're seeing is this horror of strip everything away and we're zombies. We just want to eat and repeat. And I think that's there a little bit with the Night Troopers, that they sort of embody the endless violence of the dark side. They're just there to kill these Jedi. They get killed by the Jedi. They get up and try to kill again, die, reanimate, kill, die again. I like that vibe, but I totally agree with you, and I think it's a great insight, that it doesn't become a true horror movie because we don't have that shot where Ahsoka or Sabine looks at them and sees the horror that they could become, that somebody they love could become that their understanding of the world is shattered by the existence of it. There's some great banter, and they really are like too many waves, and they aren't horrified. And I'm not arguing that they should be, but I think it's one of these interesting conversation that keeps coming up with Ahsoka, that there are so many fabulous ingredients in the stew that are they all given justice? And I think the Death Troopers book, I've never read it, but the whole point was to be a zombie story in Star Wars. The Geonosian brainworms were supposed to be like, this is horrifying. We're down in the depths, in the caverns of this other culture that we don't fully understand. We're not supposed to be here. We don't know if we can get out. If we don't get out, we're going to become them. And there's a horror of becoming them and losing your agency. And in none of that, there isn't room or desire to make it into a true horror movie. It's mostly on the surface. Ken, what are your thoughts?
I have a ton. And because we keep talking about Costco, I keep thinking, are hot dogs zombie food? Because you reanimate them in the microwave, but you're not quite sure what makes them.
And we could become them.
And we could become them.
Gosh, with the hot dog fingers.
So this is the like my own frustrating journey with pulp. Like, what do I like it or not? Like, Ken chooses side. In 2009, that Death Trooper book comes out. I remember seeing it on the shelf at what we used to call kids' bookstores, and I remember thinking, oh my God, that's, I've been kind of keeping eye on Star Wars here in these years. Let me see what's going on. And I picked up the book and I turned around and I was like, zombies, nah. And I put it back on the shelf and just kept walking. But I love the Clone Wars stuff that we're talking about here, especially on the Clone Wars Report. We really took a deep dive back into it about what it means and the themes, and I think there's that kind of connection. And maybe some of that was missing. I'm not directly comparing them. I just don't think that's fair. But like the Hard Home episode of Game of Thrones from season 5 had a real personal connection when I think that character of Carsey, who can't bring herself to kill the children who are White Walkers, or who are whites as they're called, can't bring herself. She's a mother. She can't do it. And she's killed by them and becomes it. It's this real kind of fear, like you're talking about, Joseph, of that could be you. This could happen. And I think that is lacking in this, but I really do like the look of the Night Troopers. I think the design is great. Whether flesh have been dripping out of their eyes or something, Jen, you're a scaredy cat, but I think you're dancing with your own nightmares here. That's horrifying. I do think one of the more effective moments is when that Death Trooper, who is a Night Trooper, has his helmet kind of cracked, and you're kind of seeing underneath, and you're like, what is that? Like it was up front. It's chilling for me. So I think also, and I submit this to the court here is not evidence but a question, maybe to the jury. Also, we've seen, because of shows like Game of Thrones, and certainly not first into the zombie jungle, Walking Dead, all those, any George Romero film, when they started to become reanimated, and there had been so much wonderful speculation leading up to that. The moment the Night Troopers showed up, people were like, I think they're zombies or And so when it started to happen, and Ahsoka does turn around, and they're coming back up, I had that like, well, yeah, of course. And I was almost let down because I've seen that 50 other times, and I'm not that is not a negative towards Ahsoka. They you had to have that moment, and I thought it was a good moment. But I think it was a victim of, we've been here before, and I can't. It's hard to separate, and it's not even fair to the show. But as far as overall, they were my least favorite of the pulpier side of Ahsoka. Only because I think I have a weird relationship with zombies. It's a step too far for me at times, but the design was cool. Enoch will talk about it's cool, and I really love the look, and I hope we're not done with them, and I hope we see more of it. And I want to know, at what point did they die? At what point were they first reanimated? Was it in that moment, or was it early on? But that's why when the Death Trooper shows up, I'm like, he doesn't look like a dude that just got brought back to life. He looks like he's been dead for a long time. And so there's right. A lot of that fun, chilling stuff around it that once, and again, I am not someone that needs every bit of information explained in a show. These are questions the show made me ask myself, which is actually a good thing. I'd love to know a little bit more about that. So I have a weird relationship with the Night Troopers, but in the end, I'm positive.
Yeah, I think you're bringing up a lot of great points. I think, we'll discuss at some point. We got questions coming in about Merrick, the, Mystery Inquisitor who explodes into a green gas, who seems like, actually. Yeah, he's been dead a real long time, is my headcanon. And Morgan, was getting those dreams and getting some manuscripts and tapping into the old ways and made herself an Inquisitor out of Merrick. A reanimated Inquisitor. But I do think that the audience speculation was way ahead of thinking that all of those troops lined up. I texted with Alex Damon, it's when we couldn't talk, and I would text Alex sometimes after an episode during the strikes, and we were both like, zombies, yeah. When they first showed up and they're wrapped up in that red tape that looks like of the Night Sisters, and like it is like this is containing your broken bones and melting flesh and mixed with green magic. So I think there was something in that. Oh, we got ahead of the show, and I actually liked the story in the show better, which I interpreted as no, that was just taping up their armor, and they were all alive, because I think the most emotional part of the Night Troopers story is these are the volunteers. So they went to a group of these Night Troopers who I think were totally alive then and say, you so believe in the cult of Thrawn. Here's what we would like you to do. We're going to throw you into the path of 3 Jedi, and they're going to hack you to bits. Would you then be willing to come back to life and keep getting hacked to bits and die again and again and again? And all those Night Troopers like, sounds good. That's how much I believe in Thrawn. Yeah. Or maybe the Night Sisters. Maybe they worship the Night Sisters too. To me, if I wanted to throw a horror element into it, having them wailing and screaming and going through pain to die and die and die again because they so believe in Thrawn and or the Great Mothers, like that's a part of it that can kind of get into true levels of horror. And I agree with you, Ken. Also, final thing I'll say about it is I feel like the actual Death Trooper with a little bit of it, the helmet broken away, a little bit of Jennifer's rotting flesh visible, and a little bit of that unstoppable. They're also like the Night Troopers kept coming, but besides that one Death Trooper, there also wasn't the standard zombie thing of it's not just they're going to kill me, they're going to violate me. Yeah, they're going to eat me like a Costco hot dog, and then I'm going to become a Costco hot dog. Right. They're just grabbing him. The way the Death Troopers were coming at Ezra and Sabine, I think, got a little bit more to that. Like they're not just going to kill me; they're going to do something horrible to me.
Yeah, I would have
taken even more.
Yeah. No, push the envelope a little bit. I agree with you on that, Jen. I would like if there's a second season. I still put if in front of it because we don't really know. Maybe safe to assume at some point. But if we get a second season, Amar Chadha Patel, who played Borman in the Willow TV series.
Oh yes, so good.
I want him to be a stormtrooper. They've run into it like a campsite, and he's like, "Bleep that, bleep! I did not want to be part of that." And he's like, "Let me tell you." And he's got kind of his wits about him. He's got a personality. And he's like, "No. I left the moment Thrawn. I asked that. I stopped chanting. I told Enoch, I'm out, and I ran away. That would help. That would have. That's how I want the information about what happened to characters.
It's a great comedy sketch when they're presented with like, "Who among you volunteers?" And one of them's like, what? You're all good with this. Like, in the cocky one who thinks, doesn't matter. The Jedi are never going to get me, so I'm not going to be reanimated.
Do you see the Jedi around? Yeah. There's no Jedi
fool. Here. Yeah.
That's what I think is missing is like having that type of a character within this group of heroes. Because if they're all just like, this is no problem, we're going to duke this out, whatever. But I need to have like a Finn or somebody who's going to comment who's representing us, the audience, or, like, oh, this is really bad. Like it was a funny little quip that Ezra said. That was a funny little moment, but I really want to, I don't know. I just wanted something more like a Borman type character.
Yeah. This is new. And I mean, and they're disturbed. It's not, they're like, but it doesn't get to that level of deep existential horror and dread of it's an obstacle. It's a scary, overwhelming obstacle, but not a deep fear. While we're on the topic of troops, I do want to talk about Enoch's little faceplate because my first viewing of Ahsoka, where I had some ups and downs when they got to episode 6, when they got to Peridia and like Night Sisters, Turtle Folk, cults, guy with faceplate. I was like, okay, I'm in because I so love the pulp in that episode in particular. Was like, let's go. And even the way he turns and reveals his weird little golden faceplate was really powerful to me. Ken, do you have headcanon of what's going on with Enoch or where that comes from?
I think he went out and marauded for it. I think it's a precious material from the planet itself. They talk about marauders just marauded and taken from each other and destroying. And I think I think it was his specific helmet. Whatever happened, maybe it was in a fight when they're trying to establish their presence on this planet. And at one point, he's just got an exposed face. And he's like, "This ain't gonna work." And what about this? I think he smelted himself. I think he pounded it into the correct shape. I think he put some love into it, and I think through that, he might have already had a position of authority or some sort of rank in Thrawn's crew. But I think he conquered the land with that, and it's a crown, and I think that was part of his rise in Thrawn's army.
I so agree. To me, it's got a vibe of real life conquering of people and their resources and their culture. I have headcanon like you, Ken, that this was a valuable material, and he fought with the other troopers for it and won it and hammered it. I also have that like doesn't quite match in scale or size because it's just somebody else's precious mask. And he took it from a culture that they had to go up against and that they conquered and destroyed. And I think that's what's scary about it for me. Of like, that's not right. That's not yours. And you are wearing it in this way that now has meaning within the weird culture in this cult of Thrawn in the Empire that you've created, where whosoever wears the stolen mask is ruler of the troops. It definitely has that Lord of the Flies. I have the leader mask that I stole from another culture. That to me, so I think that's just such a big difference between like Enoch's little faceplate to me is tip of the iceberg. It's fun to imagine. Whereas a lot of the other things we're discussing are, that was the start of a story as opposed to, I don't need to know the answer to this one. I'll speculate until end times, but I need to know what happened to the Night Sisters, you know?
Yeah, and you're talking about end times. People are going to put in comments. Edic has a biblical connection. A man that didn't die, who was taken up by God. All those kind of things. So I think it all wonderfully fulfills some fantasies you might have about this character, about the journey, and what a Star Wars tradition. Imagine getting that 3 3/4 figure in '83 and not knowing how that face got like that. Oh, you'd spend decades wondering, and I think that's fun.
Yeah, and we might. Jennifer, how do you feel about Enoch's little faceplate?
I loved this detail. It was so cool. And my headcanon is that they, like your guys are saying, that they stole this. It's an ancient mask stolen from another culture. And I just would picture Thrawn maybe holding the mask and saying, "This would suit you well." And like this kind of like, tender moment between these two of and like him taking that honor and then, putting it on his helmet. I really see, that'd be fun. A flashback scene, season 2.
Yeah, I think you're really, it's a great point to pull Thrawn into it. And I think it has a little bit of that of his study of other cultures' art to understand them, and also willingness to steal and abuse their culture, like that great Hera Calicori episode where he understands the culture, but only so that he can dominate it. So the idea that he would have been like, one of you is going to get this mask and I'm going to imbue it with all this meaning in our little culture. And will it be you, Enoch, is great.
It's a flex too. It's like, look at my guy.
It's a flex. We didn't have to have this whole conversation. It's a flex is the answer to this.
It's Thrawn's flex.
Yeah, it's Thrawn's flex. Enoch's flex. We've talked a lot of the dark pulp. We're going to talk a little bit of the I think lighter pulp. Starting with the Purgle, the Star Whales. We've met Purgle before, but now they're in live action. We went literally not inside the belly of the beast, but the mouth of the beast. Still pretty mythical. We saw a planet surrounded by a Purgle bone graveyard. We learned that they have the power to migrate between galaxies. The universe is theirs for their wandering. Jennifer, what was most interesting to you about the Purgles in live action in Ahsoka?
I loved that they really leaned into it because we saw a little glimpse of them in The Mandalorian. And at that time, I was like, what are they going to look like? How are they going to do this? I hope they don't look so cartoonish, right? And they did not. They look like a great mix from the Exogorth space slug, right? To, I don't know, now. And so they felt very real and very tactile. And I appreciated that we saw a lot of them. And some shots look better than others, but overall, I was very pleased. I just loved that.
Yeah, I thought they looked great. I think there's overall, I think Ahsoka looked great in terms of the the CGI elements. Like every once in a while, there's some this is shot on the volume, but I thought Unlike, as we've discussed, some of the Kenobi moments where the CGI was felt rushed and under budgeted. I didn't feel that with the Purgles. Ken, how did you feel about their look, about their meaning, about their role? What did you make of them?
I mean, my journey with those GD space whales has been well documented and loud, and I love where I'm at now, where I really do enjoy their presence. I enjoy the little moments. One of my favorite moments is Balin looking up into the sky, and they're up there, right? I love seeing that, and these are whales, and that makes you think of the vastness of the ocean, this unexplored territory on our own world and what's out there. And for them to be there, I think it's effective. I really liked it. I think there was, again, this isn't a criticism of the show. It's just where we're at. And you could have this, you talk about a ForceCenter bingo card. There's a Filoni bingo card. And so there was like, well, of course the whales are going to be there. And we had the hints with Grogu looking at him. Another beautiful moment. I love them, and I love their use, and I love this world that's unexplored. It just adds to that. I love that they, dare I say, have chosen a side, and the side is light. My relationship with them started, of course, with Rebels, because it was weird. It was, high pulp, if we can put pulp into categories, and I rubbed up against it. But this is, I think, the value of when we come to ForceCenter to engage with not just what's presented, but the themes and something you're so passionate about, Joseph. Once I really just took even the surface level themes around the whales. There's organic, and then there's the mechanic, and then Thrawn and Ezra, and how they played in that story was very valuable to me. There was a pushback. I have to own that this was during the Last Jedi era. And this is the Filoni is thy God, and they should fire Kathleen Kennedy, and he should be in charge. This is the 2017 discourse in 2018. And I just remember being like, I don't think you want that, because if he did take over, you'd have space whales. And I think you all think that's silly. And I used to, those are the arguments I'd have. So that built up a little bit of resistance to the Purgle from me. That's gone away. That's melted away. Now Dave does have a little more authority, a little more decision-making power. And look what's happened. We got the whales again, and I think it is absolutely mythic in the best ways possible. Her, Ahsoka, out on her ship, communicating with it. There's the shots around it, all effective, and I really enjoyed them.
Yeah, I think it was a great extension of how we were introduced to them. We were introduced to them through the eyes of even Kanan, even the rebels who were coded as like, these are weird nuisances. And it's a great touch point for Ezra to be like, we could look at them as other beings. We could communicate with them. We could find value in nature instead of perceiving it as an annoyance to our need for fuel, which is a real organic versus mechanic. And I think all those ideas are just the similar ideas to it in Rebels are absolutely here in Ahsoka, the natural versus the unnatural, the idea that hyperspace travel came from watching whales do it, the idea that this is their natural migration path. So like it's nature. They're just doing what they're doing. Yeah. And I also it is pretty straightforward, light side, dark side, complex controlling machinations versus just reaching out and connecting and asking for a favor because we're all connected. But I do like that Morgan's path to this other galaxy is dark dreams, ancient maps, stone technology, murdering anyone who gets in the way, and the great Ahsoka's. That's the only path there. And then the celebration of Pulp going, wait a minute, just look up, just look around you. The galaxy, the universe is infinitely more weird and infinitely more possible. And I'm not going to try to control, manipulate, use these creatures. I'm going to gently, with the Force, hitchhike. Yeah. And the idea that there is actual communication going on, it's really fun to think about. Like, is it just the emotion of how much I want to connect to Sabine, how much I want to see Ezra again? I don't think she's reaching out all peacefully going, Thrawn must be stopped. I think she's reaching out and like with the emotion of, I need to reconnect. I need to migrate back to where I'm supposed to be with my pod. And and the Purgo's like, I get that. Come on in.
I hear you.
That's my headcanon. What's actually going on there? It's really beautiful. Jennifer, any other thoughts about the Purgles?
No. I'm realizing I've talked a lot about other things. I'm going to keep it brief.
You got it. Moving on then from the old Star Whales, there's a lot in Ahsoka that's about exploration and adventure elements, the kind of pulp storytelling and serial storytelling that Indiana Jones is really riffing on. Ancient temples, lost maps, puzzles, storybook tales that begin to come true, stone circles aligned with the stars, all that sort of globe-trotting, but now it's universe-trotting storytelling. Ken, how do you think those elements help tell the story of Ahsoka?
I think it helped unravel everyone's true purpose. I love what you're saying about Ahsoka having to kind of change her viewpoint of what we're doing to succeed. What is success? What's the path to success? And this is about discovering ways. This is about uncovering and unlocking the ways to solve all this stuff. And I think that's part of the journey. Not to get too philosophical about it, but I think that's there. It's also just fun adventures, and this was what the series set out to do. This wasn't Mothma at a dinner party having coded conversation. That's a different kind of Star Wars adventure. This was what it was. It starts right at the beginning. I talked often in the last couple months here about running into our buddy Mike Black and at the Comedy Store, and him just saying how much he loved the series. The first thing he went to was Ahsoka taking the blades out, digging a hole into the ground. That was like, just that's Star Wars. I love it. I think that is part of the DNA. You are picking up and going on an adventure. And that's what we love about Raiders and Indy and all those things in Star Wars and any of these kind of, even leaving the Shire if you want, and you need to have a map to do that. Like, I think that just was valuable to what they were trying to accomplish.
Yeah, I agree. I think it has the same allure as what Indiana Jones is tapping into and what Star Wars has often tapped into. I think since, Obi-Wan Kenobi goes on his various speeches in A New Hope, or even that's a name I've not heard in a long time. The idea that there's this tantalizing truth of our past that might help us understand our present or our future. I think all of these elements add up. They're almost all ancient. Something about something ancient is being reborn or discovered, or something we assumed couldn't be true because it's so old, maybe is, I think, speaks to this deep yearning to understand ourselves. That where did we come from? How much does our past shape us? If I visit a city my ancestors moved away from 500 years ago, will I find some part of myself there? It's thrilling storybook stuff, but I think that's the deeper kind of thing it's hooking into. Jennifer, how do you feel about the exploration adventure elements in Ahsoka?
Yeah, I think that's why I loved the World Between Worlds episodes. I don't know, because it was just really exploring Ahsoka and getting her to where I wanted her to be, which was a little bit more active, engaged, right? But it made me think, there's something to what Bob Iger said about not having as many shows. And I thought that this show did an amazing job with the money that they had to make it look really, really fantastical and matching what they're presenting. But I do feel like if it was a movie, maybe, I don't know, it might have felt a little bit more grand. I feel like that's like, I think of like The Last Jedi and like, the caretaker's village, and just like there's something so real and lived in. And I felt like they kind of gave us that, but I feel like it could have been even more. And this is a character that I think deserves that. Just like Kenobi, I think could have also benefited from that. So I love what they did with the show, but that is something that I was thinking about. I was like, or maybe if they had a Game of Thrones budget, I don't know.
No, I agree with that. I think some of the scale of the temple
scale of it,
and what you're able to evoke from it. I also think, as much as I love all this stuff and it's great, I think one of the challenges of pulp and science fiction and fantasy is it is a fantastic exploration of bizarre and unseen and can't be real, but we have so much of that storytelling that it starts to feel normal, and then it loses some of that charm of this isn't one of those dramas where Cary Grant's in a suit and has conversations in a living room because it's based on a play. This is wild, unseeable fantasy. And I think Star Wars has a danger that it needs to be careful with its fantasy elements, that they don't reuse them. And as much as I love all this stuff, a little of the punch is lost when we've now had lots of lost maps to ancient things. Lots of lost maps to ancient temples. What was the most powerful in here to me was, are some of our ancient in-universe stories true? That was the most compelling to me because Star Wars hasn't been there as often as they have of temples and lost maps.
Agreed. Yeah, I really agree with that. Again, this is this is like no fault of the show. Just we'd seen some things before, and a lot of fantasy, sci-fi stuff, or Star Wars itself. So it might lose its impact, even though it's very important to the story.
Yeah. So let's talk just a little bit about the ancient stories coming true. That's such a big thread of Balin realizing, almost childlike, that it's all those stories are real. Maybe I'm going to go to Prydia and find out if they're real. Also, Huyang revealing that Prydia is a tale told to younglings at the Jedi Temple. Huyang goes so far as to use the phrase "a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away." Ken, how do you feel about the importance of ancient stories? But also, let's just be real Star Wars nerds. How do you feel about actually hearing that famous phrase "a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away" in story?
If you had told me that they were going to say that in any Star Wars show, I don't know if I would have groaned, right? I made a joke years ago about episode 9 should end with 3PO going, and these were the walls and the stars, and everyone laughed because that's silly. And this could have been on that level, but I don't think it was. I think there was something about the sweetness of the moment, something about Huyang telling the story, and Ahsoka wanting to hear it after this great conversation. It was one of my favorite conversations in the show, and I thought it was effective because of we know it's all real at this point. We're living in this. Pretty is real, everything, and so I don't know. There was a sweetness to it that I really liked that I don't think you wouldn't have seen if you had just been handed the script page.
Yeah, I think I had a complex relationship with it because I loved the scene, I loved the idea, I love Huyang, but I think I would have had that's sweet. Let's cut that. just the actual line. For me, I absolutely love the spirit of it. I love the story that the Jedi are so ancient that their connection to this other place lives on in stories that are so old you don't even really know how much of them are real and how much of them are fantasy. What I love about that is I think it reflects the power of Star Wars, that's the way we can approach these stories, is not get too uptight about canon details, but these are ancient myths, and the details shift a little bit. In what matters in the ancient myths is the spirit, the lessons, the tales, the morality tales. So I really love that. Oh, wow. An ancient morality tale that Ahsoka heard right after Plo Koon brings her to the temple is turning into something real. That's fantastic and beautiful. Love the spirit of it. Huyang saying the actual line for me, and I know a lot of people are going to have strong opinions about this one. I think every once in a while for me, Filoni does some writing that's just a little too meta, and it bumps me out of the fantasy moment. I feel the same way about that Mandalorian season 1 beat where the bounty hunter says, "I can bring you in warm or I can bring you in cold," and Din says, "That's my line." Like, I can buy that. That's maybe a thing Din started and now all the other bounty hunters are saying, but it's just a little too close to the surface of meta, of acknowledging our world of audience and show, where I want to stay in the myth as much as possible. And I'm not flipping tables. I'm not furious. I'm not saying it's awful. But I think for me, it's like, it's just it would have been really cool to me if he had a phrase that sounded almost exactly like that, but wasn't literally that. And, people had discussions immediately, and I'm sure fun discussions of, has Huyang been telling us the story all the time? And to me, that wasn't the point, but it creates that possibility. Jennifer, what do you think about all this?
Yeah, it was. I know it was supposed to be cute. I did not. I did not care for it. I mean, that's why I loved the Hans line. It's true, all of it, and that's why it became so memeable. Is you can kind of you can like you're saying, you can have a substitute to actually doing that. It took me out of the moment, and it's a moment where I was like, oh, this is, if my kids were watching, they would have gotten a kick out of that. Or I could have been like, oh, remember that's from the crawl, right? That's a moment where I was like, oh, I think I'm too old. I'm too old to appreciate this. I mean, honestly. And there's a lot of moments in this show where I realize, like, I'm an old lady, and I've seen a lot, and it's going to take a lot for me to
I've
be
seen some bleep.
surprised, right?
Yeah.
And like
Yeah.
I finally just saw Everything Everywhere All at Once. That movie was unlike anything I've seen before. It was incredible. Now I understand why everyone was so passionate about it, right? And there's just so many movies like that, and so it's going to take a lot for me to really be surprised and not an old grandma about it. I'm like, oh, that's cute. That's cute for the kids.
I love cynical Jen. That's
I'm sorry, guys. I'm coming off from the holidays. Oof.
smoking a
No.
cigarette. Going, I've seen some bleep. I've seen that before.
Seen it all. It's true. All of it.
Your oldest isn't even 10 yet, right?
8.
8. So you got a little time before grandma. But
oh God, yes. Please don't even put that out there.
You said I'm an old grandma, so I just wanted to
40.
Yeah. So you got a lot of time. But I agree, and I think that is part of what we're talking about is the absolute wonder of fantasy is new. And I think Everything Everywhere All at Once is a great example of the emotional realism. The emotional truth is super relatable right there on the surface. And then it's just covered in the most bonkers business you can. But nobody would be like, I don't understand emotionally what's happening in this film or what the characters care about. It's super, super relatable.
Right.
And then everything around it is bonkers.
Right.
Which is a really great comparison. All right. So moving on to just one more topic before we wrap up here. Pulp isn't all dark and scary. It can absolutely be whimsical. Like Ezra's Noti friends, the turtle folk, as Ken called them, or the just kind of straightforward sci-fi of Hu Yang's Rock'em Sock'em robot fight with the assassin droids, which I really, really love. Ken, did you have a favorite whimsical pulp element?
It's funny, and wanting to discuss this when we pitched this internally, and you were like, I want to talk about this. It was like, I want to talk about the Night Sisters. I want to talk about the Noti, or as I call them a lot, the Naughty, which is probably not their makeup. There's something I guarantee you in 2015 or 2014, I would have been like, no, absolutely not. I don't want this. That's not realistic. But then, I guess I would forget Return of the Jedi, forget Star Wars, forget the cantina bar with like a cricket in it, like a grasshopper. Like, this is definitely Star Wars, and it was so effective. It was, I really love this community of kind of, the only thing they got is defense. The only thing they got is survival. They can't go on the offense. That's been their way. And Ezra comes along and changes breaks the circle of and the wheel of the violence of the planet. And it is also effective and just sweet and cute. And we always say there's a place for cute in Star Wars. And this is I really, not everyone enjoyed them, I'm sure, but this from the start, when there was a little crazy Disney Mr. Toad's Wild Ride turtle there. It's like, I'm on board.
I so agree with you. And it was my thrill in part 6 too, of like, we've got the dark pulp of the witches and the creepy Enoch mask and the little turtle weirdos. Right. And I agree with you. I think like their deeper meaning is totally they're in a thematic extension of Ezra. They're living the shell life. They're about community. They're about defense. In the Rebel Alliance carve thing is great. But what I really like about them in terms of the pulp, and this is weird to go from Turtle Folk to Batman Begins, but to me that is again that essential difference where like that Nolan movie Batman Begins wants to make Batman make sense. Where there are like Batman writers like Grant Morrison there's a viral response that he gave to somebody asking him at a convention, exactly how old is Batman? Because it's not realistic that he's raised 3 Robins and he's still out there fighting. And Grant Morrison kind of loses his mind. He's like, we have the real world for realism. I want to write about a mythical man who dresses up as a bat. He's 84. He's 32. He's 37 forever. Who gives a bleep? Yeah. The fantasy is the point. So almost investing in things that borderline aren't real, can't be real, unabashedly. And to me, I look at those little Noti suits, not that they're turtle folk, that they're turtle folk who look like, children dressed up for a high school play of Great Expectations in their little suits. And that their little suits just barely make any actual functional sense. But they're there to be delightful, to be charming, to be aggressively silly and fun and heartwarming, and that's really what I love about them. Jennifer, how do you feel about any whimsical elements of pulp in Ahsoka?
I give away my time to what is that? I concede my time. I don't. I really can't think of anything because I should have liked the noties, and I thought that they were cute. But I don't know. For some reason they didn't really grab me as much. I can't think of anything at the moment.
For the noties, do you think? Yeah, go ahead, Ken.
If they were a foot taller, would you have liked them?
I think actually a foot smaller.
Oh, okay.
You know what I mean? They almost look too turtle-like for me. Take for like what was it? Oh my gosh, I can't even remember. Was that Kenobi? Yeah, with the mole character that Zach Braff played.
Right,
I can't remember. Brain.
Correct, yeah.
Like that was really fun and interesting. Because it was kind of like a character, a Cliff Clavin type of character that we know, right? But in this mole body, star mole body. So I don't know. I feel like something could have been played around there.
Do you feel like for you that we were talking about wanting to see the fantastic but needing it to be new? Did you feel like after Ewoks, after like the Lurmen, the little kind of raccoonish dudes in Clone Wars,
sirens, it's like.
Do you feel like they weren't new or surprising enough, and so they didn't break through?
Yeah, they weren't weird enough. They weren't weird enough. I think it could go even weirder. I mean, my gauge of weird is probably too weird, right? The average, person may not have liked it if it was too weird, or may not have been as believable. But it's Star Wars. You got space whales. Why not push it even more?
If they were just like a giant eyeball with duck feet in a top hat, you'd be like, great, weird enough.
Sold. Green light those characters.
Scrooge McEyeball Duck.
There we go. Let's start the campaign. Hashtag wherever hashtags still work on the internet. Scrooge McEyeball. All right, this has been a longer episode, as I thought we knew it would be. A lot of pulp elements, a lot of big ideas, but we're going to wrap up with this question. Ken, for you, any other favorite pulpy moment, line, or idea? We've talked about big picture things, so I guess maybe is there any specific thing I've skipped, or like a little moment you like?
No, I'll tell you what. This is it was an indicator of what was to come in this series when Ryder Azadi said several years ago, when talking about the Battle of Lothal, that's just reminding you it's adventure, it's pulp, it's sci-fi, it's about the lessons and what's there. It's about what we're going to learn from the story, not the details. And I don't know if that's 100% pulp, but that was a good indicator of things to come for me, and I enjoyed that moment.
Jennifer, how about you? Any other favorite pulpy moment, line, idea?
I liked the bones of the Purgle. I thought that was visually really cool. That was a great addition.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I meant to talk about that more when we were talking about the Purgles. That is one of my favorite elements. That this is their natural migration path. This is where they pass away. This is their graveyard. Is just. It's so Star Wars of the light and the dark and the natural, everything returns to where it came, including these Purgle bones. Is absolutely great. Night Sister line I wanted to shout out because it's been one of my favorites. Is when Sabine is first encountering them, and it doesn't feel like she's really. I mean, she's been on Dathomir, but she's freaked out to see them. But when the Night Sister looks at her and says, "It reeks of Jedi," such a great less is more line of to say it, and to know that these great mothers are like, we're aware of Jedi. We hates those nasty Jedi. We're not even using a he, she, they pronoun. It's it. It reeks of Jedi. And then Sabine has a pretty great are they talking about me? So I love it because it's like super creepy. Super pulpy way for witches to talk, but then also in a way it's kind of like, oh, maybe Sabine's this is a vote of confidence in Sabine. If Sabine's being like, I'm not really a Jedi, like, are they sensing force power? Are they sensing her resolve to do the right thing no matter what? And I hate it. It's like it seems like one of those great things somebody wants to insult you, and you're like, actually, that's a compliment. Thank you for telling me I reek of Jedi. I appreciate that.
Love it. That's funny.
So that's our big look at the pulpy side of Star Wars. Ken, you want to take us home?
I do. Thanks for listening and watching the show. We're on Twitter and Threads at ForceCenter Pod. We're on Instagram as well. Facebook page is ForceCenter Podcast. You can listen to us on Acast, iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts. Just search, you'll find us. Don't forget to subscribe on YouTube. We're very close to our goal of 7,500 subscribers as we grow the channel there. Merch available at tpublic.com/user/ForceCenter. And you can support us directly at patreon.com/ForceCenter. Follow me at Ken Napzok. Go to my website, kennapzok.com, to link to things like music, books, comedy, and more. Jen, where can they find you or email you nice pictures of turtle folk?
You can follow me to the dark side, which is what I've been representing today, on Instagram, YouTube at Jennifer Landa, or TikTok at Jennifer Landa 1138.
Lovely. Joseph, wonderful discussion on one of your favorite aspects of Star Wars. I know. Where can they find you?
Yeah, you can find me on all the social media, pretty much. At Joseph Scrimshaw is my handle everywhere. I am spending a little bit more time on TikTok, trying to put some videos back up there. If you're interested in any of the other things I'm doing, filmmaking, upcoming film festivals, old comedy albums, you can find all the information at my website, josephscrimshaw.com.
There you go. We'll see you next time here on ForceCenter.